Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Alice Tang in for Tiffany Meyer. Our top story. President Trump dropping a bombshell claim. Chinese leader Xi Jinping promised him not to invade Taiwan while Trump is in office. How has Beijing responded? We take a closer look. An unprecedented gathering in D.C. President Trump is meeting Ukraine President Zelenskyy and 7 European leaders for peace talks. How does China, allied with Russia, factor into the discussions?
China very badly wants Russia and America, their two biggest geopolitical competitors, to continue duking it out in Ukraine.
Germany and Japan's foreign minister are raising concerns over China's role in global security. We break down highlights from their meeting and what it means for China's involvement in the Indo-Pacific and the Russian-Ukraine war.
Without it, the war of aggression against Ukraine would not be possible.
Falun Gong practitioners who fled persecution are facing an unexpected confrontation in Europe. The former Hong Kong chief executive approached them in Park, Finland. Why did he suddenly behave this way publicly? More on what happened. And Jimmy Lai facing his final trial in Hong Kong. He's one of the Chinese territory's most prominent pro-democracy activists. President Donald Trump weighed in. President Trump is revealing a promise made by China's top leader that Taiwan would not be invaded while President Trump remains in office. Trump made the remarks Friday during an interview with Fox News chief political anchor Bret Baier. China then responded on Monday. NTD's Flora Hua has the details.
You know, you have a very similar thing with President Xi of China and Taiwan. But I don't believe there's any way it's going to happen as long as I'm here. We'll see. He told me, I will never do it as long as you're president. That's President Xi told me that. And I said, well, I appreciate that. But he also said, but I am very patient, and China is very patient. I said, well, that's up to you, but it better not happen now.
Since President Trump took office in January, the Pentagon has kept a closer eye on the Indo-Pacific than never before, from shifting focus from Europe to the Indo-Pacific to enhancing U.S. defense alliances. Just a month ago, a Financial Times report citing people familiar with the matter said this: the Pentagon is pressing Japan and Australia to clarify whether they would join the U.S. to defend Taiwan if Beijing were to attack the island. After the report came out, a senior Pentagon official said urging allies to step up is part of President Trump's agenda of peace through strength. Zooming out, the self-governed democratic island of Taiwan is facing mounting threats. The U.S. Indo-Pacific commander said China's military aggression toward Taiwan surged 300% last year. The Pentagon is also raising alarms over reported orders from Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. The orders urge the military to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. That's less than 2 years away. Although Xi's promise supposedly covers Trump's tenure until 2028, it's worth noting Xi had violated promises to Trump before, including China's previous trade deals with the U.S. Flora Hua, NTD News.
On Monday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry responded to President Trump's remarks by repeating its past statements on Taiwan, a reply that doesn't directly deny his claim. A ministry spokesperson reiterated that the Taiwan issue is China's internal affairs and that Beijing will aim to bring Taiwan under its control without using force. It's worth noting that China's ruling party, the Chinese Communist Party, has never governed Taiwan. China claims Taiwan as its own territory and has vowed to take it by force if necessary. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te rejects China's claims, saying only Taiwan's people can decide their own future. All eyes were on the White House Monday, with President Trump meeting Ukraine's President Zelenskyy. 7 European leaders joined, including the head of NATO, marking a first for this kind of summit. How does China factor into the Ukraine peace talks? NTD's Tiffany Meyer spoke with geopolitical analyst Brandon Weichert and retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, a former battalion commander, to break it down.
Well, China very badly wants Russia and America, their two biggest geopolitical competitors, to continue duking it out in Ukraine. They're benefiting in China from this. Obviously, we're bleeding ourselves dry. The Russians are totally committed to the European theater, leaving the Asian theater completely open for China to exploit, which they are. Ultimately, though, don't buy this notion of a no-limits partnership. I do not believe that there is a no-limits partnership in practice. I think once the Ukraine war, if it ends one way or the other, suddenly Russia and China will find themselves squaring off again, as they historically do. It should be American foreign policy's priority for us to get Russia inside of our tent, not outside of our tent. And you do that by getting a quick end to this war and then cutting Russia into rare earth mineral deals, oil and energy deals, and also give them a slice of this Zangezur corridor in Azerbaijan that's being built, which is going to completely remake east-west trade in Eurasia. We got to get Russia on side. That'll separate them from China. That weakens China.
And Darren, your thoughts on China?
I don't have a whole lot more to add. I think that's 100% correct. It's you've got to insert a wedge between those two nations and consider Russia a future ally the best you can, because to drive those two closer together is to create an environment that America cannot overcome. Because if you put both economies on a footing where they grow together and then grow together militarily and unite against America, that is a very difficult thing for us and, by the way, for Western Europe.
China's role in global security topped the agenda as German Foreign Minister Johann Waterfall met with his Japanese counterpart in Tokyo. The talks on Monday touched on territorial disputes in the Indo-Pacific region and Beijing's continued support for Russia's war in Ukraine. Waterfall explained why this isn't just an issue for Asia, but for Europe as well.
Freedom, security, and prosperity in Europe and the Indo-Pacific are closely intertwined. This is very obvious regarding China's support for the Russian war machine. Without it, the war of aggression against Ukraine would not be possible.
Waterfall called for more pressure on Russia, urging additional aid for Ukraine to push Moscow toward a lasting peace. He also highlighted that Germany and Japan share security concerns in the Indo-Pacific, especially over tensions in the Taiwan Strait and the South and East China Seas.
China repeatedly threatens, more or less blatantly, to unilaterally change the status quo and to alter borders in its favor. It is quite clear that the prohibition of the use of force in the United Nations Charter applies, and any escalation in this sensitive hub of international trade would have serious consequences for global security and the world economy.
In response, China warned Germany not to, in its words, incite confrontation or hype up tensions. Despite ongoing territorial disputes, China says the situation in the East and South China Seas remain generally stable. The Japanese and German foreign ministers also discussed broader global issues, from the war in Ukraine to unrest in the Middle East. The two countries have agreed to continue working closely together. Former Hong Kong Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying, who also serves as vice chairman of Beijing's top political advisory body, is reportedly threatening a religious group in Finland. Here's what happened.
Once we have your names, we can immediately investigate you one by one when we return. Your name is Miao Fengjuan, right?
The encounter was reported by Falun Gong practitioners in Finland. They often gather in parks and tourist areas to raise awareness about the Chinese Communist regime's human rights abuses and its persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in China. Last week, former Hong Kong Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying met them in a local park while they were collecting signatures in support of human rights.
In Hong Kong, after so many years, we have thoroughly investigated everything about Falun Gong.
Falun Gong is a spiritual practice that began in mainland China in 1992. Within a few years, it spread across China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and internationally. Since the Chinese Communist regime's brutal crackdown in 1999, Falun Gong has remained legally registered in Hong Kong and many other countries. Many practitioners from mainland China have fled persecution, seeking refuge in democracies around the world.
Have you been to China? Have you been to China?
I'm from China. If my family had stayed in China, we would have died.
Leung Chun-ying and his wife questioned the practitioners' beliefs and rejected claims of human rights abuses by the Chinese Communist Party. Today, more than 100 million people worldwide practice Falun Gong. In May, the U.S. House of Representatives unanimously passed the Falun Gong Protection Act.
One of Hong Kong's top pro-democracy activists is facing his final trial. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai was jailed in 2020 following large-scale protests. Critics call it political persecution. President Donald Trump said he will, in his own words, do everything he can to save Lai. Here's more.
The closing submissions in a landmark national security trial against Hong Kong pro-democracy businessman Jimmy Lai resumed on Monday. The 77-year-old founded the Apple Daily newspaper that was forced to close after a police raid in 2020 and subsequent asset freeze in 2021. He has pleaded not guilty to 2 charges of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and a charge of conspiracy to publish seditious material. Proceedings were adjourned last week after his lawyer said he had suffered heart palpitations. Prosecutor Anthony Chow confirmed that Lai had been provided with medication and a heart monitor on Friday and that he was now fit for court. Lai, a British citizen, has been held in solitary confinement for around 1,700 days. His son and some rights groups have expressed fear over his deteriorating health. Lai was noticeably thinner in the courtroom on Monday than when the trial began in late 2023. One of the judges, Esther To, said additional breaks could be provided for Lai if need be. She also acknowledged the opinion of a medical expert who examined Lai, that he was physically and mentally fit for court. Some Western governments have called for Lai's immediate release and raised concerns about the erosion of fundamental rights in the financial hub under Beijing-imposed national security laws. Authorities in Hong Kong and Beijing have said Lai is being given a fair trial and have warned against foreign interference.
Asked about Lai's case last week, President Donald Trump said he would, in his words, do everything he can to save him. An Australian Foreign Affairs spokesperson said Monday the government is deeply concerned about Hong Kong's use of national security laws to target civil society and go after pro-democracy figures like Jimmy Lai. The trial is expected to last about 10 days, with a verdict likely coming in October at the earliest. Coming up, an ad poster showing an Asian male model pulling his eyes has been drawing criticism online in China. A China expert says the situation is more complicated. We take a closer look at the Swiss watchmaker's controversy. Trade tensions between China and Europe are rising. China is expanding its anti-subsidy probe into dairy imports from Europe. And China is purchasing Australian canola for the first time since 2020. We break down what this move means amid Beijing's rising trade tensions with Canada. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Alice Tang in for Tiffany Meyer. Swiss watchmaker Swatch is facing backlash in China. It started after the company ran an ad showing an Asian model pulling up the corners of his eyes. Swatch then issued an apology and took the ad down over the weekend. Here's more.
Swiss watchmaker Swatch issued an apology at the weekend after it faced criticism in China over an ad. It pulled ads featuring images of an Asian male model pulling the corners of his eyes up and backwards in a slanted eye pose. The images for the Swatch Essentials collection were widely condemned online in China. Many comments said they appeared to mimic racist taunts about Asian eyes. Peter Xu is a fashion influencer.
They already apologized on a long-term basis. I still think the business is going to pick up because it was not really intentional. At least it was not the intention from the brand. It was just maybe some uncareful decision made by the photographer who didn't really understand China.
Swatch posted an apology on the Weibo social media platform on Saturday. The firm said it has taken note of the recent concerns and removed all related material worldwide. Swatch Group did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for further comment. The ad fallout was the latest setback for the firm. Its shares have fallen by more than half since early 2023, and it faces 39% tariffs on exports to the US. Swatch also makes Omega and Tissot watches and relied on China, Hong Kong and Macau for around 27% of group sales last year. Shares in the company slipped around 3% in early trading on Monday.
Sentiment against Swiss watchmaker Swatch's ads continues to boil on the Chinese internet. China's affairs analysts say the Chinese regime may be using the controversy to stoke nationalism and anti-West sentiment. Across major Chinese social media platforms, many users are vowing to boycott Swatch. Some even called on global investors to pull funds from brands that promote what they call an anti-China advertisement. Similar comments also appeared on several Chinese state-run media websites. Analysts say the Swatch backlash is likely backed by Beijing. A former Chinese college professor says the Chinese regime often uses the term anti-China to stir public anger and boost nationalism. He says, for one, it helps create the appearance of domestic support for the regime. It also lets the regime pressure foreign businesses in China using public opinion to push them to kowtow to Beijing. As European leaders gather in D.C. on Monday for Ukraine peace talks, China moved to extend its anti-subsidy probe into dairy imports from the European Union by 6 months. This move signals little relief in China's ongoing two-front trade tensions with the U.S. and Europe. Here are the details.
China on Monday extended its anti-subsidy probe into EU dairy imports by 6 months. It showed little signs of letting up in a two-front trade war with Brussels and Washington. Beijing said it had prolonged the investigation of some EU cheese, milk and cream products to February 2026, citing the case's complexity. The government's move comes after it extended an investigation into European pork in June, of which it's a major buyer, and after it announced duties on EU brandy producers in July. Analysts say China's seeking a lasting trade truce with the US and EU to preserve its export engine. That's as it struggles with the prospect of overhauling its economic model, with domestic demand still low. Trade tensions between China and the EU erupted in 2023. That after the European Commission launched an anti-subsidy probe into China-made electric vehicles. It accused Beijing of flooding the market with state-backed exports. Earlier this year, Brussels said the EU and China had agreed to discuss setting minimum prices for Chinese EVs instead of EU-imposed tariffs. The two sides have yet to reach a deal. China originally announced a dairy probe a year ago, a day after Brussels revised but did not cease duties on Chinese-made electric vehicles.
China's state-run trading giant COFCO has reportedly just ordered about 55,000 tons of Australian canola. It's the first shipment from Australia since 2020. Imports were blocked for the past 5 years under rules meant to prevent crop disease. The timing is notable. Last week, Beijing slapped a nearly 76% tariff on Canadian canola and has been looking for other suppliers. This comes after Canada added 100% duties on Chinese-made EVs and 25% on Beijing steel and aluminum. According to Reuters, Australia started working on a deal in July to send trial shipments of canola to China. It's unclear if this latest order is part of that agreement. China's agricultural ministry approved safety certificates for COFCO last week, giving the trading giant permission to import Australian canola. Before we wrap up today's show, NTD reporter Sam Wong caught up with a China in Focus viewer on the National Mall in D.C. Let's hear what he had to say.
I want my NTD.
Do you have any words for Tiffany?
Hey, Tiffany, good job. We love China in Focus. You're doing a great job. You give the real news, and we watch you all the time. And we watch this guy, too.
All righty.
All right.
The entire China in Focus team thanks you for your support over the past 5 years. We've committed to bringing you news about China you won't get anywhere else. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Alice Tang. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntt.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.